we are talking Dark Spell, or at least that is the English title of this Russian horror movie. Now, we've reviewed a few Russian movies on the channel, and generally speaking, I quite like them. So how does this one stack up? Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the plot. It focuses on this woman called Zhenya, who is somewhat of a put-upon young lady, you might say. She's engaged to this guy who is a complete bastard and treats her really badly, is abusive to her, and is caught red-handed cheating. But all of her kind of colleagues and her friends pretty much just tell her to kind of ignore it and just get on with it. But instead she turns to magic and seeks the help of this kind of witch woman who tells her to do this particular love spell, which requires her to do a ritual at a wedding where there's true love. And it just so happens, as if by coincidence, her best friend is getting married. So that obviously she does the spell, and it seems like initially like it's worked. Her fiance seems to be just obsessed with her, but therein lies the problem, because although he definitely is showing her more attention, but he's still an a-hole at the end of the day, and you know, just an a-hole in a different way rather than before, and becomes kind of obsessive and stalker-like. And as the film progresses, it kind of feathers in kind of more supernatural elements as well. So that's your kind of your plot synopsis there. What do we think? First of all, what works? I think one of the things I've noticed about the majority of these kind of Russian films that we've reviewed here, they always seem to have good production design and a good sort of like seemingly a nice production value. And it's true of this film as well. It feels like, you know, its time has been taken making some, you know, some spooky sets and things like this, and the craft of the movie has been you know, not rushed, and it feels like it's assured hands behind the camera here. And as such, you get a nice polished feel to this movie. And like I've said, I do think there is some, I mean, it's a little bit typical spooky, but there is some kind of nice production design here in regards to some of the kind of, you know, the spooky visuals that you'll see. For example, the Zhenya's fiance, this artist, so he has this kind of like studio, which of course has all got spooky mannequins and all that all over the place, and we have the kind of the black wedding and stuff as well. So there is some kind of like nice gothic kind of, you know, set pieces and things like that. I also have to say there's some reasonable effects in this movie. There's a great sequence towards the end of the movie that actually is a CGI effect, but I've got to say I thought it was quite effective and quite unique looking to some degree, you know. The movie also benefits from having somewhat of a variety in the way it's told. The first half of the movie kind of plays more like a slasher, while Zhenya's fiance essentially goes on you know, just a kind of a weird stalker rampage, really, kind of just wanting all of her attention and kind of trying to forcibly remove anyone who takes it away, be it her, you know, Zhenya's mother, her young baby, a friendly doctor, anyone who kind of, you know, essentially takes the spotlight off him he wants rid of. So, but then as the film goes to the second half, it becomes more of a supernatural movie, and you're dealing with more kind of demonic forces and stuff there. So you have somewhat of a variety. Maybe therein lies the problem, because it does feel like somewhat of a discombobulated film without a very sort of straight narrative. It just feels like it's a bunch of things kind of thrown at the screen. I have to say, I think the first act is really weak. The setup here is absolutely awful, because you feel like you get real no characterization, and you can't help but think the characters on display here seem too over the top. For example, Zhenya's fiance, he is like such an incredibly over the top a-hole. You cannot believe what anyone would even bother trying to kind of stay with him. It just seems beyond the pale. And even then we have a kind of another kind of romance kind of set up, and it's just something happens there with kind of the best friend, which I don't know, just didn't ring quite true to me. It all seemed a little bit contrived. It just, things seem to happen for the sake of the movie to move the plot on, rather than any type of realistic kind of setup here. So I have to say, I think the setup was quite weak. And then we go into when the threat arrives, the first threat we see is this kind of more of a terrestrial threat, albeit the guy's under a spell, but he's like just a guy ultimately. And I have to say, I think that was possibly the more interesting part of the film. The second film, where it kind of goes more into the kind of the supernatural and demonic, it goes into pure generic kind of like possession sort of story. And although it's kind of nice looking and kind of, as I say, has a decent production value, it's your bog standard kind of possession movie. But because it feels a little bit crammed in, because you have these kind of two separate halves. Now, the version I saw was dubbed, so it's hard to kind of really judge the acting. So I won't really judge our performances, because the cut I saw was dubbed. The dub was awful, to be brutally honest, but that isn't the actor's fault, so I won't critique the acting in regards to that. Overall, the characters did feel somewhat cliche, however, and just really not particularly well developed. I have to say, as our main protagonist, Zhenya, you don't really root for her, because you feel like a lot of this she's brought on herself, and the characters just seem too far removed from reality to really buy in as real people. And, you know, the supernatural stuff, it has some flashy moments, and there are some, you know, nice gothic visuals here and there, but the through line, the narrative, is relatively kind of weak and at the best generic. So I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. It's a nice looking film, and there are some elements that I do think work in a kind of on their own as a separate part. But as a whole, it's one of the weaker Russian horror movies that I've seen. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.